Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ellis Cannon, and it's a pleasure to be with you today for Pittsburgh Sports Straight Talk. It's our inaugural event. We've got a great panel for you today to talk about sports. We're at Mike's Beer Bar, and of course, we're right across the street on Federal Street from PNC Park. We're very thankful for people at Mike's and everybody that has helped make this happen today. We're going to have a good show for you. We have a debate that typically goes on in the sports world. When is the best time of year for sports? A lot of people say spring, which I sort of favor. A lot of people say the fall. A lot of people favor that. But I think when you start talking about the Pirates getting started, the Penguins, wherever they may be, at this point, of course, we know where they're not going to be, but nonetheless, it's an important time for them, and a very, very important time with the Pittsburgh Steelers with the draft approaching as they come off their off season. So we've got a wonderful panel of experts that will be with us during the course of the next hour, and that'll include Tim Benz, also Dorin Dickerson, and Jason Mackey, who we'll start with in just a few minutes as we talk about the Pirates. But those are means to an end. We love talking sports. We could do that all day. But what we're here for, the end, is to create awareness for the Parkinson's Foundation of Western Pennsylvania. And with me to talk about that is our very, very good friend, the executive director and CEO of that organization, and that is Christine Haythorne. Christine, thank you so much. It's a real privilege to be with you once again.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Alice.
And
Thank you.
The truth is that when we start talking about Parkinson's Foundation, it is in disease. It is very important, I think, for folks to understand something they may not, and that is this is something in Pittsburgh's backyard for a variety of reasons, demographically, environmentally, and so forth. Explain why that is so much the case.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that Parkinson's disease is the fastest growing neurological disease in the world. And right now, about 1.2 million people in the U.S. have it. Every 90 seconds, I believe, someone is diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, 90,000 people a year. Pittsburgh, because of our age in this county and region, it makes us a natural spot for Parkinson's disease because we have the average age of onset is about 60. But one of the fastest growing segments is young onset. And in addition to the age of our community, we have a lot of manufacturing, a lot of toxic chemicals that are used in that manufacturing, pesticides, and a terrible air pollution problem. So per capita, I believe that Pittsburgh is the number 2 hotspot in the country.
Well, that's amazing, and that's, again, really powerful to think about when we put it in the context of what we're doing today. We're having fun, but we're having fun for a purpose, and I'm sure we'll be highlighting that in various ways people could learn more about the Parkinson's Foundation of Western Pennsylvania. I'm intrigued by the environmental component because that goes back decades. I'm intrigued by the age for the reasons you said. There is a racial component, though, that maybe people aren't aware of, and also the impact of brain impact injuries. How do those things play a role in where we are with the situation here in Pittsburgh?
Absolutely. Well, recently, very recently, within the last 6 months, a gene was identified that indicates that people of African heritage are more predisposed to Parkinson's disease than others. And yet that's not necessarily reflected in the programming that we currently do in Western Pennsylvania. So we're trying to address that. And then there is another statistic that says that people who have CTE or traumatic brain injuries, 60 to 70% of those folks end up having Parkinson's disease as well.
Okay, so 4 big factors there. Now, one of the things that astonishes me is the work that's done by the foundation and the amount of resources. This is personal to me for a variety of reasons, but I know the power of what organizations such as yours or ours does, and specifically for people from onset all the way through. Talk a little bit about the resources that you have, everything from connection to working through exercises, support groups, and all that comes with it, recognizing that the website has so much more detail.
Right. Excuse me. I think that Parkinson's is a unique disease in that depression, apathy, anxiety are all symptoms of the disease. We know the rest of the world is fighting those same issues, but when it's actually a symptom of a disease, it makes it very, very important to have a community, to socialize, to receive benefits of a support group. And, we do all of that as well as a lot of education through major events and monthly webinars. We try to keep everyone informed of the resources available for PD. But the most important thing you can do for Parkinson's disease is to exercise. It's the pharmaceuticals that we have address the symptoms of the disease, but the only thing that they believe can slow the progression of the disease is exercise. So we have 90 exercise classes every week. Some are virtual, some are in person, and it's ranging from Tai Chi to boxing to yoga, pickleball, a lot of different activities so everyone can find something. I think that from the support group standpoint, we have 35 of them currently, and it's growing. And some are, again, virtual, some are in person. They're for caregivers only. Some engage both the caregiver and the person with Parkinson's. Every support group has a different personality, so there's something for everyone.
Okay, well, thank you so much for setting the stage for us, so to speak, cracking the ice and getting us moving. You're going to be back with us a little bit later here at Mike's Beer Bar. Thank you so much for what you do, and appreciate you getting us started today.
Thank you, Ellis.
All right, we're going to take a break for a moment, and we come back. We're going to start talking about the Pirates. It's early in the season, but Jason Mackey, who, of course, has moved on from the beat writing position at the Post-Gazette, a long-time spot he had, is very, very informed about the Pirates. He's now, of course, a columnist with the Post-Gazette. We'll be getting his thoughts, including why he thinks some of the key categories he identified before the season are so important as we see the season unfold. That'll be coming up right here next on Mike's Beer Bar.
For all your sports watching needs and great food, meet me at Mike's. Mike's Beer Bar was voted best sports bar in Pittsburgh. 300 local beers, 80 local taps, over 500 beers, and steak on a stone. Mike's Beer Bar, next to PNC Park, Federal Street, North Shore.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Ellis Cannon, and once again, you are watching Pittsburgh Sports Straight Talk. We are coming at you from Mike's Beer Bar, 110 Federal Street, right across the street from PNC Park. If you've not been here, get here and have fun. In the meantime, we are going to introduce our panel right now of esteemed media members, and we're going to start with Tim Benz. He's not only just a great media guy, but I think he's half my brother. He is a very popular columnist, of course, with Trib Live. He does enormous things on various platforms, and you see him everywhere, and rightfully so. He's terribly hardworking. Also, I work with him with Duquesne basketball and football. He does the play-by-play, and I'm his sidekick, and we enjoy that a great deal together. He also does play-by-play for Robert Morris hockey, which he's excellent at as well. So we'll get to Tim in just a bit, but Tim Benz, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Brother.
Anything for you, E. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much.
Sidekick.
Well. That's right. We've done that now a couple of times. Dorin Dickerson, of course, is well known to Pitt fans and media fans, sports fans throughout the area. 6 years in the National Football League, All-American football career, of course, at University of Pittsburgh, and originally out from West Allegheny. He gives a lot of analysis, a lot of views as a player, which makes him very, very, I think, unique, invaluable in the discourse here in Pittsburgh. He serves as a host for the morning show on 93.7 The Fan. Dorin, once again, it's always a pleasure to work with you.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
Most importantly, he endures Crowley every day. So
Yeah, right.
That's his biggest accomplishment. It's
My hair's turning gray as we go on.
It's not working with Tom Brady. It's enduring Crowley.
Yeah.
So
That's very good. I like that. And the Pirates outlook is going to be provided by Jason Mackey. Once again, I mentioned moments ago that, of course, a longtime beat writer there for the Post-Gazette, now a columnist taking on all types and kinds of issues and topics. He's in the early stages of that and off to a great start, and we're very, very thankful for him. I should point out that this is something that we had talked about doing for quite a number of years. Something called COVID got in the way. Christine stayed with it. Diane Belcom stayed with it. And as a result, we're all together due to their efforts today. So it's a real honor to be here in this situation. Jason, how are you?
I'm doing great, man.
Okay.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me. This is fantastic.
Yeah, we appreciate our format is basically going to be you talk for a few minutes. Maybe I'll ask a question or two. These guys will jump in, and then we'll take some turns going around. But my starting point, because it's so early in the year, is actually something that you wrote about in late March with the Post-Gazette after spending the spring training with the Pirates. And that would be 5 things that you characterize as some things that must happen for the Pirates to really break through. I'd like you to get through them, recognizing again, for the billionth time, the caveat that, of course, it's early. You really identified the rotation as being valuable, that it was time for Derek Shelton, the manager, to take another step, so to speak, my words, perhaps not yours. Obviously, O'Neal Cruz, that he has to be a star for this team, that this needs to be an elite defensive team, and finally the situation involving Paul Skeens, which seems to dominate and hover above just about all of those at any given moment, needs to be something that's resolved. Let's start wherever you'd like, but I thought the rotation was good enough.
Yeah, I went back and looked at that, and I was pretty happy with it. I'm still, those are important things that didn't change. Sometimes that you get those things blown up in your face, but the rotation so far, Ellis, I think has been far beyond my expectations, other people's expectations. Again, sample size is very small. Something I didn't include in there that I think is equally as important, just become the culture in baseball today, the bullpen. And David Bednar has not been up to snuff thus far. You haven't seen anything from Carmen Majinski. Ryan Baracki's been hurt. Colin Holderman's been largely, it hasn't been a huge part of it. But if you work down that list, yes, O'Neal Cruz needs to give them more offensively than he has. Jack Sawinski needs to give them more offensively than he has. Henry Davis, Andrew McCutchen. I'm not going to draw any conclusions on these guys based on what we've seen thus far, but O'Neal Cruz, I've watched this kid for a number of years, dating back to when he was in Double-A. I wholeheartedly believe that at the end of this season, we're going to look back and say he has become a star. He is somebody that they legitimately know around Major League Baseball. He has all of those tools, all of the talent. He's not putting them together thus far, and I don't think he's had a very good start, but very long season. I forget what the 4th point was before I get to Skeens. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I think you missed Shelty.
Missed Shelty, yeah. A lot of his late game decisions. Theoretically, they should be playing well enough, and the defense too is part of that. I think as part of the manager and the coaches, they need to be putting themselves in a situation where Shelton's decisions matter, and he should be criticized for them. I don't know if we've gotten to that point yet. I don't think it's been that close where you can say, ooh, this was a silly move, this was a great move. There's certainly been some on either side, but I don't think that's been a huge factor. The Skeens thing, I don't think we're terribly far off from seeing Paul in the major leagues. I do think mid-May, I've said that. I don't think there's a lot to be gained from him in AAA. If anything, I think they're doing a relatively smart thing in protecting his innings at the minor league level. You can't have a 3-inning start in the major leagues, but you can have a 3-inning start down there. And they can only use so many innings. They're using them down there, but this kid does not need the minor league time. He's going to get built up a little bit. People are going to see him across the street in May. It's going to be a lot of fun.
For the longest time, it seems like we've spoken about the rebuild, because, in fact, it's been rebuilt. And to a certain extent, Derek Shelton has sort of, I won't say got a pass from that, but, of course, he's almost looked at as a victim of that in some ways and difficult to judge. Have we passed that point?
We better have. It's been long enough. Are they fully out of it? No. But are they far enough down the road that you should evaluate them like a real baseball team? Absolutely. They've said, what's that?
No, go right ahead.
They've said all along, Ben Cherington has said repeatedly, they have the resources they need to compete. Well, they do, and so you should, and we should, as people on the outside, evaluate them based off of that. I agree they should have been not given a pass, but you have to look at context. You can't really say that Derek Shelton is a bad in-game manager when he's choosing Miguel Del Pozo or Dovydas Neverauskas. Bad and worse.
Right, I guess.
But different personnel right now, I think it's fair to evaluate different.
Okay, so you talked about defense. The offense is now cold, as we're well aware. The New York announcers the other night in the Pirates get swept for the first time, a 2-game set in Gotham. And the truth is that some of the announcing, they were highly critical of the Pirates, to the point where we're back to their fundamentals are terrible. And I think it was asked on air, I know it was, what did they do for 6 weeks in Florida? Is that too harsh, or is that the type of thing that we want to continue to track?
Man, I could pick 5 or 6 things that I've heard that are way worse than that over the past couple of years.
Yeah, right.
Hodgepodge of nothing just come to mind?
Yeah, that's one. John Kruk calling them a JV team.
Right,
that would be up there.
Yeah.
You know what, though? to a degree, they should be criticized for the lack of fundamentals, silly base running mistakes, defensively not making plays that should be made. I mean, this is basic stuff for the Pirates. If you're not going to spend, which we know they're not going to spend, requisite of the league average or anything like this, I'm sorry, defense, baseball nuance, strategy, plays that are right there on the table for you, you need to be able to make. And this team hasn't been, over the past couple of years, good enough with that stuff. And as I wrote in that piece, Ellis, I mean, you look around the diamond. Ke'Bryan Hayes is a Gold Glover, should have been a Platinum Glove winner. Jared Triolo has the very distinct possibility of doing the same thing at second base. He's been outstanding. You can look at his numbers thus far. Michael A. Taylor is a Gold Glove winning center fielder. They should be able to field the ball defensively. They should be able to run the bases. So far this season, I would say they haven't done either of those things particularly well.
Finally, when I take a look at the guys that have to do something, obviously behind the plate, Henry Davis, who's now in the lead seat in that position, and yet offensively, a lot needs to be done there, and not the greatest start offensively for Cruz. What's the take inside on those guys?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of belief that they're going to figure it out, and I think they should. I think with Henry, you have to give him a little bit of a pass. Being a catcher at the major league level, young catcher, having not done this before, is so darn hard. Mm-hmm. It really is. Like, I'm in that clubhouse a lot, even now in my role, and plan to be in there a lot. You never see Henry Davis just, like, sitting around idle. Mm-hmm. You know, whether it's physically preparing his body or meeting with pitchers or going over scouting reports, he walks around with this iPad that he has. It's like a glove, the glove on his hand. It's a weird little contraption, but he's always looking at something. So I'm trying to extend some grace with that.
Right.
Being a 1-1 pick, you certainly want the guy to produce offensively, and he needs to produce offensively. With O'Neal Cruz, it's a matter of cutting down on strikeouts, better bat to ball, skills, contact rate, all of that stuff. We've seen him get fooled. We've seen him struggle with breaking stuff. We've seen him struggle left on left. Some of that is usage. I'd like to see him maybe drop him in some situations if it's left on left. But either way, it is in there. It's just a matter of bringing it out.
Yeah, I think he's doing something like a .85 or so when it comes to 24 at-bats against lefties with 10 strikeouts. And just overall, the numbers are down, the strikeouts are up. Guys, what are you thinking? Anything you want to throw at Jason? Go right ahead.
I thought everything Jason said was spot on. I mean, everything. Dare I say that was the most efficient thing I've seen since Jared Jones threw 50 pitches that were strikes in 59 attempts the other day in Queens.
It didn't take you long to go there. I don't blame you.
That's because he's been thinking about it ever since that happened.
Are you tired? Do we have to pull you, or are you okay? I think you're okay. I mean, I'm going to give you another inning. I don't know what Schulte would do. I don't know what Sherrington would do.
I'm pulling you.
Listen, on this podcast, I was told I only had to do 40% of it, so I'm getting out of here.
Yeah, okay.
You only had to say 40 words instead of 50. I mean, like, I get it. I know what the tone of baseball is, the protect the arms thing, but there's a line, isn't there? And I would think
I didn't like it.
I think that line would be having literally what people are tracking as one of the most efficient starts in the history of baseball. And I want to know if that's coming from Schulte or if that's coming from Sherrington to Schulte, because you talked about it. You really piqued my curiosity when you talked about your fourth point being what the decisions are for Shelton. I don't know what his big game decisions are because I don't know where they're coming from.
It's very much collaborative with those two.
Who's collaborating on game day in that moment? Is there literal collaboration? Is it coming down the phone?
I don't think there's a decision in that moment. Like, I think they went into that game saying Jared Jones is going to go 5 innings, and they would not adjust off of it. And that's my issue with it.
Because they love to say not all innings are created equal.
Right. But in this case, they're all created equal, right?
I know.
Doesn't that make sense? And they love to say that we're winning. Winning is the priority. Winning wasn't the priority there. Now, I understand the discussion. You're saying this is a great young arm. We want to preserve his health, all that stuff. Great. No problem with caring for the young man's arm. But my issue with that decision, Tim, adjust in the moment. Okay, we went into this thinking this is what it was going to be. Well, Jared Jones is tremendous, and we have a chance to win a ball game, and we need to win a ball game. Just keep doing that. And then if Derek Shelton has to come out and say, hey, you know what, this was our plan before the last start. We adjusted it. Obviously, we wanted to try to beat the Mets. That's an important thing for us to win games. But we do need to be cognizant of this young man's arm and his health. So he's going to sit down his next start, whatever.
Yeah.
You're telling me fans wouldn't understand? I think they would.
I do.
Like, we're winning the game. We have a chance to win. But we also need to, as his manager, need to make sure this kid stays healthy and he's good for the long term. Like, that's a reasonable discussion to have.
And just to recap Dorin, those same announcers said the word saw, as in this kid is sawing through the lineup. 50 strikes and 59
Is what?
pitches. Sawing.
Sawing, okay.
Yeah, and 50 out of 59 pitches were strikes. 16 batters, first pitch, strikes 12 times. So obviously pretty impressive. But what else you got?
Well, I think it would be a shame that if they do make it to the playoffs, that if he is on an innings count or on a pitch count, that he wouldn't be able to be used.
Right.
I mean, he's a young pitcher. He isn't Paul Skeens. He isn't 6'5", 250 pounds. He's probably 5'11", and 190 pounds, maybe 195 pounds soaking wet. He's not a big stature guy. So if you tax him early, I mean, he is a prize piece. He's great right now, but you do want to let him develop. My thing for you is on Henry Davis's side, and I think we talked about this maybe last week. I asked you almost the same question. Do you think he's thinking too much? He seems like a tense player. Even last year, watching him in right field, it seemed like he would overthink things, and he wants to be so good, and he wants to be so good right now. It seems like he outthinks himself, overanalyzes things.
I think Henry Davis would overthink himself in the shower. Like, that's just the kind of guy he is, man. Like, and I love it about him. But it's funny being in that clubhouse. Rowdy Tellez is such a chops buster. It's hilarious. And he loves giving Henry Davis a hard time. I almost want to go up to Rowdy and be like, turn it up. If you're at 7, like, go to 9. Yeah. Let's see what happens. Yeah.
Like Bill Guerin and Sidney Crosby?
Yes. Like, that's where Henry's at. So, yes, I think he's overthinking. Yes, I think it would do him some good to just relax. I do admire the work ethic. I admire the care factor. Tough to criticize a kid for that. But yeah, I mean, it's just, sometimes you need to loosen up.
I, for one, have never overthought myself in the shower.
No, I haven't either. But
just say it was the first mundane activity I could think of.
Well, I have one for you. If he overthinks anything at Mike's Beer Bar, then he's got a problem.
Well,
okay?
He's not coming over here. That's the thing.
That might help as
There's
well.
500 taps, Ellis. I mean, you can really overthink yourself here.
Maybe he should come over, have a beer, and relax.
He does not drink.
Yeah, well, turn on to the Grateful Dead. You know all about that.
I can't imagine how that discussion would go. That'd be a very short one.
All right, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and start with Tim Benz. Tim's going to be talking to us about the Penguins. Of course, their season is over. He was at Clean Out Day earlier this morning, and we're going to get his take on what he saw there, what he learned, and, of course, his assessment. We'll be right back from Mike's Beer Bar.
For all your sports watching needs and great food, meet me at Mike's. Mike's Beer Bar was voted best sports bar in Pittsburgh. 300 local beers, 80 local taps, over 500 beers, and steak on a stone. Mike's Beer Bar next to PNC Park, Federal Street, North Shore.
Back, everybody. Ellis Cannon along with Tim Benz and Dorin Dickerson, as well as Jason Mackey, who just gave us a great overview of what's going on with the Pirates and where he thinks things are going, all benefiting, of course, Parkinson's Foundation of Western Pennsylvania. So, Tim, we, of course, introduced you earlier, and, boy, we could talk for days about the Penguins, but we would be lonely because the season is over in some respects. It would seemingly be the end of the conversation. But just reading what you wrote today at Trib Live and knowing the Pittsburgh sports market, I think we're going to be talking about it for quite a while. What was this morning like in the 2 hours of media availability at closeout day?
A lot of depression, a lot of realization about how they left a lot of points on the table, a lot of things that the media has been talking about, that the fans have been talking about for quite some time. I think there was some catharsis that was there within the players that we spoke with, insofar as there were things they wanted to say out loud, but they knew that they couldn't because it would just make matters worse and really foster more negativity surrounding the team. They knew how many times they blew leads. They knew how many times they blew it in overtime. They knew how badly things were going from that 5-game win streak they had in mid-November all the way until they started this one hot stretch of play. I can't remember which player it was. I think it was Brian Russ, perhaps, that talked about the inability to gain traction and momentum. That was their biggest flaw, is that they couldn't win more than 3 games in a row, but they were doing a good job of giving away points in more than 3 games in a row. You had that stretch of 5 straight wins in November, and then they didn't have a stretch beyond 3 consecutive victories until they got to the 7-0-3 stretch at the end of the regular season, that last gasp that almost got them to the playoffs. But because they'd given away so many points earlier in the year, it was just too little too late.
Okay, and Tim, I think the themes, and you touched on a few, but you and us, people here, of course, at Mike's, everybody has talked about it. The blown leads late, the blown leads when you've got more than a goal lead, the power play being awful, the PK not being very good, and giving up 12 shorthanded goals. Goals allowed after a goal. I mean, that is the most. That's
late in the period. They're excellent at giving. They had another one against the Islanders in the meaningless game at the end of the season. Another one with like less than 1 minute left.
Right, but I mean, the thing that always drives me even crazier than that is score a goal and then give it right back in 40 seconds. But that's something they've done for years. Very mixed bag with the guys that did come in this year. When you take a look at those themes, how realistic is it for things to change going forward if there's not coaching changes and personnel changes?
It's sort of like that scene in Tommy Boy.
Oh, of course.
You know, you've identified the problem. Now do something about it. They are great at identifying their own problems. They identify their own problems tremendously. What they don't do is anything about it. And, you know, when it comes to the arguments that people have about retaining Mike Sullivan or moving on and getting a new coach, one thing Kyle Dubas, the general manager, has repeatedly said, as soon as you get rid of a Mike Sullivan, you're looking for a Mike Sullivan. I think we've been looking for Mike Sullivan since Evgeny Kuznetsov scored the goal and started flapping his wings in 2018. Like, I want that Mike Sullivan back, that guy that held players accountable for when they made mistakes, because right now I feel like it's only the young players that get held accountable. It's only the guys that are easy to be held accountable that pay for the mistakes that they make and lose ice time or get scratched, whatever the case may be. I want to see that more, especially for an older team with veterans that he's been around, that he's won with. He still has to be willing to, I think, hold their feet to the fire when they make those kind of errors.
So, Tim, I have to say that everybody's talked the last 12 or 13 games, and the truth is that that was the best I saw the Penguins play, not this year, but for a couple of years, at least. I thought they were playing very, very good together. Defense, offense, everything. In that zone that they keep things tight. I mean, they look great. But they came up short. So now the question is what type of value to place on it. You had a phrase in your piece in the Trib Live today that talked about a false dawn. How concerned are you that people will be looking at the last 12 or 13 as opposed to the first 70?
Well, I mean, it might actually kind of meet in the middle in the offseason anyway, in the sense that I don't know how much change they can incorporate with their own roster as it is because of the contracts that they have, because of the no movement clauses that exist with those contracts. I call it a false dawn. What I was suggesting there is to management, don't believe that what you saw is going to carry over to next year, because we heard a lot of the same things coming out of last year, that they would address the problems. We all identified the problems, and it didn't happen. I mean, to the degree that they lost to the crummy Chicago Blackhawks to kill their season last year, opened with them at home, and then lost to them again. Nothing changed there, and I fear that we'll be in that same situation because we'll be talking about the same shortcomings, and a lot of the same players will be hearing the complaints but not doing anything about it. Now, what you said, they look better over those last 10 to 13 games, you're right. I think part of that was they just started scoring. I mean, for as much credit, and rightfully so, was given to Nedeljkovic for stepping in and winning 7 times in 10 games and getting them 3 points in the other ones to get that 10-game push back towards relevance, the bigger deal was they were scoring again. They were winning 6-5 and 5-4. Look at Nedeljkovic's numbers. I mean, his save percentage was below 90. He was giving up 3.5 goals a game, but they were winning largely because they were finally putting the puck in the net again. Look at some of those numbers when it comes to their team shooting percentage in the middle part of the season. Obviously, a lot of this has to do with the power play inefficiencies, and I don't know how that gets fixed. I'm sure we'll see changes on the coaching staff to address that, but it's still more about the players, especially when you got veteran players of that magnitude that are given as much slack as they are and creativity as they are. Sullivan talks about, I don't want to take the stick out of their hands. That's the phrase that he uses all the time. I don't want to take the stick out of their hands. I get it, but sometimes you got to get in their ear a little bit and get in their head.
We may talk about prospects only in the sense that maybe there are a couple for the first time in a long while. I know we want to talk about goalies, but it's very difficult, Dorin, for me to concentrate. Number one, I see you nodding your head and you want to chime in. And number two, I'm still thinking about that deer going through the windshield in Tommy Boy, and it's just really hard.
I was talking about the where he had the pine trees. Yeah. You remember that when they're in the elevator together?
Yeah. I like when he sold the waitress on how to present something. Whatever. Go
you
right ahead.
You depict their whole season in a series of Tommy Boy clips. I'm saying that's what I was doing.
That's very good.
Will Jari be here next year?
I think so.
I think so too.
I don't know who picks up his contract.
I know. And based on what Sullivan said and how he said it today, like driving up to Cranberry today, I was thinking like I'd trade Jari, I'd look to trade Jari, whatever. Hearing Mike talk about it and how he answered the question about a goaltender tandem and how much they like Tristan, I feel differently about it. I think they're rolling it back.
Why not start him yesterday? Why didn't he get the start?
Yesterday?
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
Or the Nashville game.
What's that?
Yesterday or the Nashville game, or both?
Yesterday. Why didn't he close the season out as the starting goalie? You're paying him $5 million a year.
That was weird.
Why didn't he get the start?
See, I would have leaned in that direction. Here's a dated reference, but would that also have smacked of the Bubby Brister, I don't mop up for anybody?
Well, I don't know Kenny Pickens, but I will tell you that the idea that jumps out to me is that, no, I thought, would they make that change? Pickett. The reason I bring that up is because of, seal it, and then we'll start here, if that's where you are. So when I didn't see it, I'm thinking what Jason said, maybe there is no there.
He just doesn't even want to bother. The only thing I could think is that they've gone that far with Ned. Like, Jari has not played. Maybe he's risking himself or the team, or you're just ending on a sour note. I don't know. I'm trying to, find my footing inside of Mike Sullivan's head. Mm-hmm. But it certainly didn't seem, from his answer, his body language, his expression, all that stuff, like he does not like Tristan Jari. Like, there's a different way to answer that question if you don't.
Well, and to extrapolate the analogy that you just drew, and it's a very easy one to draw, if Alex Nedeljkovic is Mason Rudolph,
right,
then the theory is, like you just said, what the Penguins are doing is what the Steelers did with Kenny Pickett to start the offseason.
Right.
Push your chips in, make it sound like you're behind him. 100%, the next thing you know, Tristan Jari is a Philadelphia Eagle.
Right. right. Flyer.
Andre Vasilevsky, come on down.
I'm willing to bet he'll be a Flyer next year.
Oh, boy.
Just like Kenny's an Eagle.
I was kidding about the Philadelphia thing, but yes, I could see it happening for sure.
Well, we have a lot more, but we're going to take a break right now. There are a couple of prospects, of course. Everyone's looking at the goalie at Wilkes-Barre. We'll see. Prospects are prospects in all sports, but nonetheless, it looks like there'll be a little bit of that conversation going on next year more than we've seen before. So there you have it. That would be our Penguin talk. We're going to come back, and we're talking Steelers. Just talking off-season before the draft would take us a long time. We're going to try to get that nice and tight for you, and then, of course, we'll be talking about the draft, and that is just a few days away, next week. Yeah, a
week from today.
We start counting on hours now. 3-day event, a national holiday. So we're going to do that. We're at Mike's Beer Bar. We'll be back in just a moment.
For all your sports watching needs and great food, meet me at Mike's. Mike's Beer Bar was voted best sports bar in Pittsburgh. 300 local beers, 80 local taps, over 500 beers, and steak on a stone. Mike's Beer Bar, next to PNC Park, Federal Street, North Shore.
Welcome back to Mike's Beer Bar, everybody. I'm Ellis Cannon, along with Tim Benz and Dorin Dickerson, Jason Mackey, and we've been talking about, of course, Pittsburgh sports, all with an effort toward creating even greater alertness and outreach to people, corporate sponsors, and more as we talk about the Parkinson's Foundation of Western Pennsylvania. So joining us right now, Dorin, I have to say that between Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Cameron Johnson, Patrick Queen, Dante Jackson, the trade of Deontay Johnson, Deshaun Elliott coming in, Cordero Patterson coming in, it's been a pretty active offseason, unlike a lot of others. I don't know how much it's impacted them yet, but I do know that was a very busy one. What do you make of it?
Isn't it crazy that it's been an active and there's been so many splashes this offseason, but they still have so many holes?
Absolutely.
That's
perfect.
the crazy part. Like, they made splashes. They got Justin Fields. They got Russell Wilson for $1.2 million. I don't know who wouldn't take that deal. I mean, that's a great deal. You're paying him pennies. He's free. But they still need a center. They let Mitch Morse leave. They had an interview with him. He came to Pittsburgh. They let him leave. He ends up signing with Jacksonville. They need a center. They possibly need a tackle. They need a corner. And they need wide receivers because, just like you said, Ellis, they traded Deontay Johnson to Carolina, which I personally think it was a kind of a bleep you. See you later. You're going to go to the worst NFL team in the NFL, and we're going to get back Dante Jackson to play corner. I think that they have a lot of work to do. And Andy Weidel, Omar Khan, their eyes are really set on the draft. Last year I thought was a really good draft class if you look at from top to bottom, and really for the first 3-4 picks. If you look at, Broderick Jones coming in late playing, they trade up to get him, first-round pick, obviously tackle. You got Joey Porter Jr., who had a good year last year. You have Darnell Washington. You got Keanu Benton, and you got Herbig. They all had meaningful snaps last year. So I think they have their eyes set on the draft, but that's not enough.
No.
Guys, that's not enough. And I would expect them to make a trade, honestly, within this next week.
Well,
we
have seen, of course, Omar be active in that department at the draft as he was last year. It's clearly a different way of doing some things. There is a draft. There's after the draft free agents. There's June 1st free agents. For all I know, what do you do with Najee fifth year? I mean, we could talk about that forever. And I'm convinced that guys get signed in the third quarter of games in NFL. I mean, it just seems like there's always signings that are going on. I look at Patrick Queen. I follow the Ravens quite carefully, and I've always been a fan of him. Go back to LSU. There are two Patrick Queens. The first couple of years where he got caught up in traffic, where he had difficulty dropping and in coverage. And then the last 2 or 3 years where, without going into the analytics, he was very, very good. He was free to play, in my estimation, because he had a linebacker that allowed him to do that. He had Roquan Smith. There better be a Roquan Smith, which there aren't going to be, on this roster. Somebody, though, that is reliable enough to allow him do what he does best and avoid what he did earlier in his career.
You would hope that could be maybe a Landon Roberts a little
That's
bit,
right.
but if you're going to pay a guy what they paid him, I mean, you're expecting him to be the guy. You're expecting him to make the plays. But otherwise, if you look at the Roquan Smith, and that's why Patrick Queen played better, you could make that link. But you can make a lot of links on defense and
Sure.
why guys play good. Up front, Cameron Hayward, T.J. Watt. Why do you think Alex Highsmith plays the way he does? Because he's Robin. He doesn't have to take on the double teams. T.J. Watt, he's one of the best in the league. Alex Highsmith is kind of a forgotten guy. He gets paid a lot of money to go out there and make plays. But I think that Roquan Smith will hit the ground running and be that Roquan Smith on the latter half of his Ravens career, is because if you look behind him, he has a basically all-pro safety that will help him, that will guide him, and make sure he doesn't have to think. Playing linebacker is about playing with instincts. You don't want to have to think. You get guys lined up, left, right calls, that's it. And then you go get the ball.
That's right.
That's what he has to do, and I think that Minkah Fitzpatrick being behind him, guiding him, getting him set up will help him out a lot.
Arthur Smith.
Arthur Smith was my assistant tight end coach in Tennessee, and I as a tight end coach, I loved him. I love what he did in Tennessee in 2019, obviously, with Derrick Henry, and they make it to the AFC Championship game. Ryan Tannehill was their quarterback. They want to run the football, but he trusts his quarterback. And I think the Steelers really went into this situation looking, we need another set of eyes, and not just on offense. We need another set of eyes, but as a head coach set of eyes, somebody that has been there. Arthur Smith, hey, look, he failed as a head coach, but he still has the experience. That is going to help them out tremendously on offense. They need somebody that can go in that room, that can be a general. He's that type of guy. And having Russell Wilson, I think, will help this team out a lot. From what his experiences are, what he's been through, I think he and Arthur Smith can get on the same page. But, look, they want to run the football and use the play action as much as possible, and that's going to be their method going into the season.
I've seen one analysis that says that Russ, and I've always loved him going back to when he was an undergrad at NC State, lives by the mantra of shooting a three-pointer or taking a layup. His intermediate numbers are not good. He loves to throw the ball long. That's great. But he's also become a sack machine as well. He's not as mobile as he used to be. Justin Fields, 135 sacks since he came in the league. That doesn't include fumbles. That doesn't include the fact he had time and wasn't able to connect, and yet he's an incredible athletic marvel. Does this all start because the Steelers missed at number 20 a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I think they reached.
Yeah,
They reached. I mean, if you look at the draft, it's like we need a quarterback. All right, what are the quarterbacks out there? There was Malik.
right.
Willis.
Willis.
Malik Willis. I mean, the
Willis,
the quarterback class wasn't great. So they knew Kenny Pickett. They knew him. He was next door, and they thought that he could be the guy. Yes, now that they had to revert back and go and release or trade Kenny Pickett, get Justin Fields, get Russell Wilson. I think that they will regret that pick, and they probably do right now. They could have used it on something else, but that quarterback class wasn't great at all, and they had to take a quarterback.
You could make the argument they overthought something we talked about earlier, or they just missed because they fell in love with them. And the truth of the matter is, when there's no one taken at the position for like 132 picks after that, you're out there by yourself. And either you're on an island you won or you lost, and right now it doesn't look particularly good. Tim, what do you got? And Jason, what do you have?
I want to know the trade within the next week. Who are we looking at?
I think they need to get a number 2 receiver. Like, I mean, you're going to Russell Wilson. If I'm the starter or if I'm Justin Fields, I'm like, okay, I got George Pickens. And if you do your analysis on George Pickens, which every quarterback does of their whole team, of their whole offense, okay, if he starts to get double teamed, is he going to get upset?
Yeah.
I think he's going to get upset. You need to get a guy on the other side. It can't be a draft pick because you're not going to take a receiver at 20. So you're probably, if anything, at the highest, you're going to get one in the second round. If I'm a defensive coordinator, okay, you have a second-round receiver. Not saying that guy can't be good.
Right.
But I'm not worried about him. I'm still
You're
going to
load
double
up on
George.
George. Yeah.
I think of the options that we've heard, the most recent one is the most likely one. Cortland Sutton.
I would agree.
I mean, I would prefer Ayuk for sure, and then I prefer T. I just don't think the Bengals are trading in division, and everything I'm getting is that the Niners are still willing to talk to Ayuk. They just don't usually do it till August. And any time a Steelers-related story comes up about them sniffing around Brandon Ayuk, that agent jumps on Twitter as fast as possible to say there's nothing to it. Like, I think he thinks he can get more out of the Niners to retain him than he's going to be able to get out of the Steelers in a redone deal.
Yes.
So I think that's the agenda there on those two fronts. And I also think I don't know what Cortland Sutton's relationship was with Russell Wilson. I really don't. But, I mean, I think in terms of what he would cost, how they would use him, how I think he could complement Pickens without intimidating Pickens or making Pickens think he's no longer the number one, I think you might have the most harmony there and actually be able to make that deal without giving away as much collateral as well.
Bigger body receiver. That makes so much sense. And all I know is
and Denver, I think, is more willing to think of themselves in a rebuild phase. They wouldn't command as much in return, and they'd be more willing to negotiate on a trade.
Exactly. I don't know, just like you, I don't know the relationship with Russell Wilson or Cortland Sutton, but I know one relationship is that Cortland Sutton had 10 touchdowns last year. That's pretty decent.
And you know what? He's a very good player.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's a big body
he's
receiver.
I mean, I get that, but again, and that in light of the fact that it was Russ throwing. Look, he had obviously a spike in his touchdowns, and again, I've been a fan forever. But if you go into some under the hood, some of those numbers aren't as solid as you might otherwise think. And I think that when I see Carson Wentz's big year referenced as a tipping point that we ought to look at with Russ Wilson, I get nervous. I get real nervous. What about you, Jason? You don't get nervous about anything.
Well, I've seen some relatively low performance. No, I do not worry about Russell Wilson at all. I mean, I agree with Dorin wholeheartedly on getting a number 2 receiver. It worries me if teams are able to load up and defend George Pickens. I don't think that's going to go well. I think that's certainly doable in free agency. Another thing I keep coming back to them, though, is the offensive line. And that's something Dorin brought up with the number of holes that they have. Like I'd ideally like to see Broderick Jones shifted over to the left side. What do you have on the right? Do you draft the right tackle? What are we doing at center? That's still a giant question mark. To me, at this point, based on what the draft boards look like, where they're picking, I probably would like to see them take a center. I think that's the most likely option.
You mean like a center who's played center?
I mean
or are
a
we talking
true
about five?
center. Jackson Powers Johnson. If he's
Frazier.
there,
You could trade down and get Frazier.
Trade down to get Frazier.
Well, that's exactly what I would do.
You'd trade down?
I would trade down.
Yeah.
I would trade down. In a perfect world, what I would do, I would trade my later second-round pick for next year for Ayuk. I would try to get him. That's my second-round pick of 2025. I would trade back, and I would get – and I think that there's going to be tackles that fall. I would get Amarius Mims, and then I would package some of my later picks
and you're saying
and
along
trade back
with
up.
See, the Mims thing to
I'd
me –
be thrilled if that's
Trade
the way
back up
they
to get
did
a
it.
center.
I like who Mims – I think Mims could be great. I also what is it, 100 pass reps he's had?
Yeah,
he's pass blocked 100 times in his career.
Tim, 6'7", 340 pounds. You can't teach that.
Oh, I know, but I also wonder if they're getting him for next year, and this just advances their agenda with Dan Moore.
Probably. Unless
If you're solidifying
progresses.
center, I'll take a project tackle. I don't know about you. I don't think you're going to be able to address both positions with starters out of plug-and-play positions.
And offensive line strong. We know cornerbacks are strong in the draft. Offensive line everywhere, and, of course, wide receivers. Man, I'm one of those guys that think that you have to have a great rotation on the D-line. I mean, I remember when the Ravens did that years and years ago with Goose and everybody. You have 8, 9 guys. They just rotate. They wear you down. And I really hope that they could address that. One last thing on Wilson, and then I think we're going to have to close to get wrapped up. He threw the ball last year behind the line of scrimmage 30% of the time.
That's the NBA thing you talked about.
That's right.
He has been called an NBA quarterback
That's
by
right.
Warren Sharp. That's where you got those numbers, I
You're
think, right?
100% right.
Yeah.
And deep 14.5%, which was third.
597 quarterbacks since 2005. He's thrown the ball at or behind the line of scrimmage more than everybody but one.
Right. Yeah. And again, really not much down the middle. But again, he's here. Hey, it's not like they got the world invested in either player. I mean, if they have to reset, you can change at 25.
You can change the offense. You can change the player. I agree those percentages need to change. You need to utilize the middle of the field. You should have the weapons to do it, but nothing says that's going to repeat itself here.
Right.
They're in a better situation at quarterback right now than they were last year.
They're still better.
And that's all that matters.
If they get into the playoffs with 10 wins again and they have to go on the road to Buffalo or Baltimore, Cincinnati, or wherever, Houston, I think at least Wilson gives them more of a puncher's chance than what they had last year.
No doubt.
Saw him down the stretch against Houston. He threw a pick in the end zone late, the third of the day, that I never saw him make before. Those are the types of mistakes that come, I think, with just a little too quick as you get older and perhaps a little bit more jittery. Okay, so that's a wrap on all of that. We're going to come back and we're going to put a wrap on the actual event here. We've got a wonderful audience here, and we're thankful for so many people to be here in support of this. We're going to come back with some special thank yous right here from Mike's Beer Bar.
For all your sports watching needs and great food, meet me at Mike's. Mike's Beer Bar was voted best sports bar in Pittsburgh. 300 local beers, 80 local taps, over 500 beers, and steak on a stone. Mike's Beer Bar, next to PNC Park, Federal Street, North Shore.
Well, that's a wrap on the talk portion about sports here, and of course why we're here at Mike's Beer Bar in the inaugural Pittsburgh Sports Straight Talk. It's been incredibly fun, and we anticipated it would be with three great guys, Tim, of course, and also Dorin Dickerson and Jason, and put it together for the benefit of the Parkinson's Foundation of Western Pennsylvania makes it that much better. So to the panelists, we obviously appreciate their expertise and their time and their willingness to be involved in this important project. We also want to thank the audience for being out here and supportive as well. And Diane Belcom, who takes care of me. She's my big sister, and she is an incredibly valuable asset for the foundation as well. I want to remind everybody you can go to the website, which Christine's going to be telling you about momentarily, where you can find out even more detail about what the foundation does and why it'd be important for you to get engaged in that. I do want to make certain all the guys that you don't see here get noted, Eric and Jeff and the guys here and so forth, and everybody at Mike's Beer Bar for making this a wonderful inaugural event. So what do you say?
I say I'm incredibly grateful to Mike's Beer Bar for being our presenting sponsor. Very, very generous of them. And in addition to the other folks who are in attendance today, I'd like to thank the PFWPA staff who are there every day, all day, working hard on behalf of the Parkinson's community.
Well, you're the executive director. You set the table, and you do a marvelous job. Your passion has taken you to Washington, D.C. It's taken you back in the day, pre-COVID or so, on the show with me up at PCNC and WPXI. It means an enormous amount to me for us to reconnect again, and I'm really happy about it.
Thank you,
Keep
Ellis.
up the great
it's
work.
Wonderful.
You're welcome. And make sure you go to pfwpa.org for information. I want to be very specific about my next few comments. If you are a potential corporate sponsor out there, we see you, and we're going to do our best over the course of the next year to find you and to get you engaged in what we did here today for the second. If you thought this was fun for everybody to do this, imagine it being even bigger, more people live, all that comes with that.
Smack talk.
That smack talk or whatever it might be. The 2025 event will be here very soon. We will convince you of the need, the value, and the importance of your support on something that is in Pittsburgh's backyard. It's not just around the country. It is in Pittsburgh's backyard. We need you. We have an outstanding foundation that will help you and work with you and leading the way, and we're looking forward to partnering with you. Thank you very much. You'll be hearing from us, and thank you for everybody here for making this such a wonderful event. God bless. I'm Ellis Cannon.